off on its own. But
Yeah, all good. Sweet. Yeah, you're saying like, got to be yourself. You said you wanted to come in and just be yourself at the Dragons, Catalan Dragons.
yeah, I mean, so yeah, if we're trying to get across a philosophy that's not necessarily mainstream, that's going to sort of knock against what guys have been taught in the past, then it's important for guys to be able to see that you really believe in what you're talking about. So for me, the players weren't seeing me eating junk food. They weren't seeing me, going out, drinking every weekend. They weren't seeing me, uh, you know, engage in sort of, I guess, negative mindset behaviors. So that I think is the first step for them to start to think, well, I wonder what this guy's about. And then I think they feel it. They feel if you're really into what they're, helping them to be the best that they can be. That's something that they feel on a subconscious level. They're trying to work out whether it is that whether you really believe in what you're talking about and whether you really want to help them with it. And then they'll start to listen. So that's the key. I think you have to first be able to show guys something. Whether it's your own performance or whether it's what you put on your own plate or how you live your life. Those things are really important to start with, and that's you have to really practice what you preach, I think, and that's the biggest thing with rugby league guys. It's not necessarily on an intellectual level that you're going to convince them. It's much more so on a subconscious level, and just from them seeing that, this is something that's working. I try and be super honest with the guys. Sometimes, it's brutally honest. I tell them some hard truths about, what they've been told in the past. We are lied to constantly about what's good for us in terms of food. Even for, programs that are about health, we'll still have junk food ads in between. So, subconsciously, we're constantly being pushed towards habits that will lead us to rely on modern medicine and will lead us to poor health and performance, I think. So it's a battle if you're going to try and change people on that deeper level, to change their beliefs, to change them, to even make them value themselves, to convince people that they're worth it. People say organic food's expensive. Well, I say you're worth it. That's something that people have to be convinced of. Some people have. I think most of us, the biggest challenge that we have that holds us back from what we really want in life is our self-image. And, if we don't think that we're worthy of being really healthy and being great performers and living a great life, then it's unlikely that that's going to become our reality. So it has to start from there, from guys really wanting something, from them, committing to something, to being the best version of themselves. And then we can talk about the details. And the details are important, but if we don't get this stuff in place first, then the details are going to be, ineffective. So this is what I talk about. At the Dragons and the Roosters, I did this stuff in small groups and had opportunities, now and then to sort of speak to players and say, well, this is what I believe in. This is why, and this is how I think it can help you. At the Tigers, I've had the opportunity to address the whole group a couple of times. Because it's a consulting role, I don't spend as much time there, but I've probably had the chance to have potentially more of an impact than I had at the other two clubs, just because of the way they've structured things when I've gone in there. And I love it, man. It's been really exciting, and I know that the head coach there, Jason Taylor, is really into this approach. One day we were sitting down at the Australian Institute of Sport. I was talking to Dylan Napa, one of the young guns at the Roosters, great young guy, probably quite typical in terms of, his lifestyle for a young guy, living in Bondi and doing well. And I was trying to have an impact on him and help him to understand, why it was that eating a low inflammatory diet could be a positive thing for him. At the time he had, constant kind of knee and back aches and pains, that aren't necessarily normal for a 21-year-old guy. Yes, he's playing a tough sport, but I was trying to convince him about the value of a low inflammatory diet. And Jason Taylor was sharing the table with us, and I don't know how much I got through to Dylan Napa, but from that time, Jason Taylor really had a big change, and tried the approach that we're talking about, and gradually he worked towards eating an optimal diet for himself, and it really impacted his life, and maybe you'll be able to get him on for a podcast at some stage. But a lot of the aches and pains that he'd had all the way through his footy career and even beyond, 10 years post, some of those aches and pains, disappeared, and had, some real positive change in terms of energy and outlook and those sorts of things, which, a lot of us do see when we get this stuff right. So JT having that personal experience really gave us the opportunity at the Tigers to go a step further with it, because the head coach, when the strength and conditioning coach or, a performance consultant is saying something, that's one thing. But when the head coach is saying you need to do this, that's another thing, because the head coach is the guy who's going to be selecting the team. The head coach is largely going to be determining what the value of your next contract will be, to a decent extent, much more so than a strength and conditioning coach. It's an exciting opportunity there at the Tigers, and I had the chance to have some of the players come up to my place here. I live on a basically like a resort style place, like a retreat near Byron Bay, North Coast, New South Wales. I had some of the players come in here and see how I live and eat and all that sort of thing, and do a lot of training over the Christmas break. And we're having a try at having an impact. So we'll see what the outcome will be, but I'm enjoying the process for sure.
Yeah, definitely. JT was a hero of mine when I was growing up watching footy. North Sydney Bears, used to love it. Mate, that was one of the next things I was going to talk about.
Every game.
Yeah. Mate, that's the other thing I was going to talk about, was like when I heard your podcast with Anthony Minichiello, and he was talking about how he changed his diet to a very like low inflammatory sort of thing, and including a lot of things like bone broths and just keeping things like really nutrient dense, and how you're saying that he thinks that was one of the things that helped him extend his career, and he's had an awesome, successful, very long career. Like, do you think that working with him and him being an example for some of those younger guys, that really helped as well? Or yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Even before I was working with Anthony Minichiello, before I went to France, I went and spent time with his mentor in terms of nutrition, a guy named Aaron McKenzie out of a place called Origin of Energy in Bondi Junction. I went and spent some time with Aaron just to try and understand, what it is that those guys were doing, and did some training there, ate some meals there. They have a great cafe next to the gym, and it's a great place to train. If anyone listening to this is around that area, he's a guy that's worth spending some time with. I spent some time with him, and I spoke about his experience with the guys at the Catalans Dragons, not thinking that one day I might be actually coaching, Anthony Minichiello as his captain in the team to a premiership. That wasn't in my mind at the time. But yeah, I always sort of called on that example because I knew about that. I actually sort of had contact with, Tom Simons and Marty Kennedy and some of the guys at the Roosters who were into that sort of approach. They were actually getting in touch with me from time to time while I was in France, because they knew that I was passionate about it, and I was starting to sort of share that, that message through, Twitter and blogging and, the wonders of modern media. But yeah, Minichiello's example is a super powerful one. I definitely spoke about him, often when I was talking about this stuff with the guys, and not all the players take it on to the nth degree, but there's definitely a big shift amongst the team culture. When we eat team meals, they're nutrient dense, quality meals, which is probably the opposite of still what I would say 3/4 of professional teams are doing. They're generally eating high inflammatory meals with low nutrient density, high caloric density perhaps. But yeah, we made a big change in that, and Anthony's success and his professionalism, his commitment to his own performance, and the fact that he values himself and his own performance so much, definitely had an impact. And the other side of that story is not just about taking out those anti-inflammatory foods, but Anthony also spoke about the cycle of pharmaceuticals. The doctor in most professional teams, is seen as being they're basically the dealer. They generally will share and give medications, obviously well intentioned, but For Anthony, he felt that was definitely a big factor in his back injuries and neck injuries that needed surgery, and then almost ended his career and were massively negatively affecting his quality of life. He feels that the pharmaceuticals were a big part in that, and I can it's not too hard to see that spiral of firstly taking stimulants for a game and then needing to take sleeping pills, after a game to get some sleep, and then maybe you take some sleeping pills during the week as well, and that affects mental health, and then maybe you start taking either antidepressants or you're using anti-inflammatories and they're knocking around your gut health. We know that most of the immune system is in the gut, so that whenever we have a deterioration in gut health, through anti-inflammatory. Some people bleed from the first time they take the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. So if you're getting bleeding in the gut, then you know that you're going to have food bodies entering the system. So that's going to trigger off an inflammatory response. So that means that you need more anti-inflammatories. And we know that anti-inflammatories actually stop key components of the healing process anyway. So they're really only a short-term fix. But many players have used them over and over and over again just to be able to train each day, just to be able to play each weekend for years on end. And then they wonder why their immune system doesn't work so well, so they're on antibiotics. Antibiotics then have their own consequences of decreasing mitochondrial function and just knocking around the immune system, so then you can get some serious infections happening, and you have that low level infection, inflammation constantly there. And we expect them to be optimal performers when they're in that state. So this is a little bit of where I see the spiral. Not to put words in Anthony's mouth, I think it was somewhere along those lines that some of those things were happening to him, and I've seen it over and over again with different players. So it's basically the opposite end of the spectrum that we're trying to operate at in terms of using food as medicine, as it has always been throughout time up until the domination of pharmaceutical medicine, which has been the last sort of 60, 70 years, which is definitely coming to an end as well, I feel.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely, which is awesome. So, mate, you and I understand inflammation and anti-inflammatory foods. Like, this is a podcast for, rugby players. Like, what can rugby players do right now to reduce the inflammation in their diets, and what are some other things that you think can really, make their diets bulletproof, for the lack of a better word?
Well, Bulletproof Executive is one of the guys. He's basically branded himself on Bulletproof. So if you're going to use that word, that stuff is pretty good. Dave Asprey's stuff. It's not necessarily aimed at elite athletes, but the principles of what he talks about are definitely there, and definitely have some serious carryover. It's mostly those kinds of foods that I believe in. So what do we need to do? Well, if a doctor wants to scar a damaged ligament, then one of the tactics that they can use is to inject glucose into that damaged ligament. This is a technique that is used reasonably commonly in sports medicine. It's reasonably well accepted that injecting glucose into a ligament will increase scarring and inflammation. So this is an example I use for players to help them to understand what they're doing to themselves if they're ingesting massive amounts of sugar on a regular basis. They're causing that glycation, they're causing that local inflammation and scarring, but they're doing it on a systemic level. So whenever we have blood sugar rises and falls, spikes and troughs, we're going to cause that excess scarring and inflammation, which the body can clean up, but it takes a lot of energy to do that. And we don't want to be spending energy all the time on clearing up excess scarring and inflammation that's caused by the foods we eat. We want our body's healing capacity to be used for training, so that we can, train harder more often, get more, adapt better to our training, so that we can train better the next time. Without adaptation, training is a completely wasted time. It's the adaptation to training that makes training worthwhile. So we need to tailor our nutrition and lifestyle around optimal adaptation, so that we can train more and train harder and train more effectively and recover from that continually. It's definitely a trend in rugby league and basically every sport to train more In the elite individual sports, the volume of training that those guys are doing is much higher still than what we do in team sports. So there will continue to be an upward trend, I think, in training volume and training intensity for team sports. So you need to be able to go with that intensity. The players who can't go with that intensity, will fall off, whether they fall off because, clubs don't want them because they can't deal with the intensity, or because they're not able to improve their skills enough, improve their quality of their play enough because they're not able to tolerate that volume. And this goes for kids as well now, because kids are, increasingly, becoming, affected by this as well. There's a lot of kids now who are sick, who are, injury prone and just not going to make it in professional sports because they don't have that base of health and well-being to be able to progress. So, for parents listening to this and for young guys who want to make a difference, if you're 14, 15, 16, you're probably not as bulletproof as, 14, 15, 16-year-old was 20 years ago. You probably need to take this stuff on board and, think about what it really takes. So basics in terms of getting started with this, cutting out the sugar. Then from there, trying to decrease the chemical intake in your diet and into your system in general. Okay, so basically the first thing we should try and do is to stop poisoning ourselves. If we're poisoning ourselves, that's kind of, banging ourselves on the foot and then with a hammer and then, hoping the foot doesn't hurt anymore. So it's not going to, we're not going to get optimal results while we're still using that. So pharmaceuticals fit into that category, as we've spoken about, and you need to be smart with that. Obviously, the most dangerous time, the time of highest risk of suicide, is when you first start taking antidepressants and when you get off them. So, with all those drugs and medications, you need to be smart about those things and, get the right kind of medical support to make any of those kind of changes. But we do want to transition away from relying on chemicals to balance our system. We want to try, some of the other things that we talk about. Obviously, organic food is pesticide free, fungicide. All of those chemicals kill a living species. That's what they're there for. If they didn't kill if they didn't kill pests, then they wouldn't be there. The difference between us and the pests, the main difference is size. Okay, so there's enough quantity of that stuff on plants to kill the animals, but they won't kill us directly, but they do over time. I believe that's really clear. If you're not sure about the damage that those things will do, then you just have to look at the 200,000 Indian farmers who've died mostly from drinking their own pesticides because their farming systems didn't work because they got affected by modern agriculture. But that stuff is poisonous. It's just a matter of quantity and how much you think you can handle before it damages you. Some people are more sensitive to it than others. Okay, so liver function and detoxification are different between different people. But the ability for the liver to detoxify has become one of the key traits of the 21st century. So it's about survival of the best detoxifiers is the 21st century story. So we need to try and decrease the toxic load. So pesticides, tap water is another one that I try and get rid of. Personal hygiene products are laden with chemicals. Don't put anything on your skin that you wouldn't put in your mouth. If you wouldn't spray your deodorant in your mouth, then you shouldn't be putting it on your skin. Some of the deodorants with essential oils and whatnot, you probably wouldn't want to put in your mouth either. But that principle is there that anything you're putting on your skin is going into your bloodstream. If you're putting it in your bloodstream, then you're going to have to detoxify it. And there are chemicals in those most of those personal hygiene products that are known to be either cancerous or they act as like estrogens. So rather than taking a testosterone supplement, which would obviously be illegal, you're doing the opposite and taking an estrogen supplement. So you're trying to give yourself man boobs and make yourself more like a woman, basically, by using that stuff. And a lot of pharmaceuticals are estrogenic as well. Okay, so the biggest health crisis, the fastest growing area of medicine is fertility treatment. So estrogens in our environment are a big part of why that's the case. So we want to take out the poison. There's a bunch of them there that we could go through, and I've given you a couple. But take out the poisons. From there, we want to eat nutrient-dense foods. Okay, so what we talk about, vegetables are the first ones. Vegetables are important for us in the 21st century because we need to detoxify. That's why they're so important now. So if you're not eating vegetables, which I know a lot of professional athletes don't because they're not that calorie dense, you need to start. Okay, that's going to be really important for us. We want to be eating nutrient dense foods, and the density of the complexity of vegetables and the density of things inside them that can help improve our system's function goes way beyond modern science. We can talk about that in detail, but there are combinations of compounds there that have been used throughout time that are very active, that have strong effects that will not be quantified or replicated by supplements or pharmaceuticals. We want to be eating meats, good quality meats. Our ancestors considered muscle meats to be the junk part of the meat of the beast. Okay, so moderate quantities of muscle meats and trying to use some of the stuff that our ancestors did value, which was organ meats. So we're talking liver, kidneys, brain, heart, the bone broth. Yep. So the bone marrow, the stuff from inside the bones, the stuff that leaches out of bones. They're actually the most important components of the animal that our ancestors and animals in nature value. If a lion makes a kill and it has in its rush, it'll just eat the liver and then take off. It'll go for the insides and take off. And the same happened with Native Americans. When they killed a bison and they didn't have time to dry it out, they would take the liver just straight out, eat some raw liver, and then go about their business, continue on their way. This is, part of the regime that Anthony was using had, raw liver in it. He would use chunks of frozen raw liver in his smoothies. So you need to look up how to do that stuff smart and how to do it so it tastes all right, if it's going to be sustainable. And it does taste all right. We need to try some of those meats here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think especially in my book, I've tried to talk about the benefits of eating, nutrient dense food and why it's more important than just, like you said, the calorie dense stuff. Like, yes, obviously we need calories, but I mean, the vitamins and the stuff that you just spoke about are just as important for performance, at a cellular level. And that's what you need to get across to rugby players, because especially amateur, and I'm sure it's the same in rugby league, everybody wants to know what the best protein powder is, what the best fat burner is, but it's real food where the answers are, and hopefully that's something that I'll get across in my book, and as I keep working with different players here and there, that's something that hopefully that'll change. And I think the whole movement towards real food at the moment is really good, and you've seen a lot of the professional athletes in the NBA and stuff like that now, taking on a more primal approach, for lack of a better word, and just really going back to those nutrient dense foods like we're talking about, and really embracing good quality fats, good quality meats, and a lot of veggies. And like you said, just getting away from that being running on sugar all day long and just trying to get in calories that way. Like, absolutely, we need to work on better choices. So mate, we'll start to wrap this up because I don't want to take up too much more of your time. One of the questions that I want to ask all the guests is, what would you tell a 20-year-old version of yourself if you could go back now?
Yeah, 20, I probably was still a chance at, going to the Olympics for hockey. If I had known what I know now in terms of nutrition, and definitely in terms of sort of mindset and success principles, I think that probably would have happened. Whether that would have been a better path than the one I ended up taking, I don't know. So, I believe everything happens for a reason, and I'm happy with the path that I'm on. I have a beautiful life, and I have a beautiful wife and baby, and I couldn't be happier with the process I'm a part of now. So I wouldn't necessarily change anything that's happened, even though there were obviously tough times along the way, a lot of hard flaws during those backpacking days and sort of soul-searching times. But I definitely would have gone further in hockey if I'd have understood what I know now about building mobility, building tissue resilience through quality training and eating the right foods to be able to rebuild the body. I probably should have gone and seen Aaron McKenzie or learn about that stuff a bit more at that time. So you can learn a lot more about that stuff through Weston A. Price, and Paul Check has some interesting stuff there as well. Maybe you can put some of the links in your ebook. I'm sure that's going to be a great resource as well to really target rugby and rugby league players. They definitely need help, as all sections of society do. But if you can make a difference for some of those players, Jake, I think that's a really worthwhile thing to do. That if they can get this stuff right, if they can start, eating for performance rather than just treating themselves as garbage cans. There's a whole new level of performance and longevity in sport, and to avoid some of those joint replacements and all that sort of stuff that a lot of guys consider to be inevitable. If we can get the movement stuff right, if we can get the nutrition stuff right, we can avoid a lot of that stuff and play better footy, play more international games, whatever it is. All that stuff can happen if we get this stuff right. I've seen it happen. I'm sure you have as well, Jake. So it's definitely worthwhile to put some time and effort into this. And I just want to say thanks for having me on, Jake. And I really wish you the best of luck. If there's anything else I can help you out with to get this message out there, let me know, because it's a really important message, and it's one that I definitely I'm dedicated to sharing and to trying to make an impact with. So thanks a lot for this, Jake, and keep doing the good work.
Thanks very much, Keegan. Talk soon.
Sweet. See you, Jake.
Thanks, mate. Bye.